With tragedy at hand, I rushed into the operating table, tried to revive the switch by turning it on, but quickly realized the Switch Lite was dead. So, I immediately disassembled the Switch Lite, hoping that maybe letting all the internal components dry out would solve the issue. Unfortunately though, upon disassembly, I noticed the fault caused by the bath that would prevent this switch from working again. My name is Darius, I am the Game Junkie. Let's examine what happened and see if we can repair this water-damaged Switch Lite. Right here, you can clearly see a break in the connection, and of course there was. I'm hoping that this is the only problem with the Switch. I ordered a new screen replacement from AliExpress because they are cheap on AliExpress. This is just a display by itself. The digitizer on the front side of the Switch Lite is actually not connected to the display. There's an air gap between the digitizer and the display. Hopefully the digitizer's in fine shape. Screen itself can be replaced from the backside. And okay, there we go. So we look at this small ribbon cable on the right side of the display. You can see this thing, all 4 pins on there flow perfectly. There's no breaks in the pins. Okay, so I'm just gonna move some of this stuff to the side. This is all the internal components. A lot of this stuff's going to the side for now, so we can replace the display. The adhesive on here I think is pretty strong, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a heat gun and heat it up carefully though. Careful when heating up this display to make sure that we don't also damage the digitizer. Like that. Warm it up. A lot of the footage was lost and I've had to rewind. So this is the new display currently installed in the Switch Lite. After we took the heat gun to it, what I did was took this pry tool and I just went around starting with the corners and lifted up the display from the adhesive until the display was loose enough to pull out with my fingers. What we're going to do now is reinstall the buttons and the membranes. So starting with the ABXY buttons, the A sits over here. The orientation in which it sits, the arrow should be pointing to the outside. Drop that in there. X, B, and Y. Let's go next the D-pad, which can be dropped in anyway. Then the screenshot button. We've got the minus button, plus button, the home button, and now the membranes. ABXY membrane has a little equal sign in it, fits into that spot right there. D-pad membrane has a hole in the middle for the rocker. And when you're pushing these down, they kind of make a nice seal around it, but when it's laying on its face, it's not going to do that. Let's reinstall the analog sticks. These are the new style analog sticks. Lift up the display ribbon cable gently. Make sure those gaskets are laying down flat, and then you can kind of push it in there like that. Put this one in as well, and then we will fasten them down with the Phillips screws. When we started this, I had the Switch disassembled. All the screws were in this clear tub. And what I've done, I've actually taken a small whiteboard, put some double-sided tape down, and then I've put the screws on the whiteboard and labeled them. So there is 8 types of screws in here. I labeled them by size. Take a snapshot of this if you're reassembling your Switch. This is super helpful. I had a hard time finding anything online that looked like this. The analog sticks that we're about to do now, those are the 3.5 millimeters here. They've got kind of a coarse thread. Get the screws started in there, and then before I fasten them down, careful when you're pushing it down, as you can see there, it flexes a little bit. Just kind of be wary of that. With the sticks in, now we can push the membrane pads down to seal them up. These are sort of like the membrane pads for the Game Boy Advance SP, where they are a little bit deeper, kind of keeping dust from getting inside the Switch. We're going to install the mid-frame assembly now, which is where the battery lay we are just gonna put it right down on top of there. There's this ribbon cable from the display that's kind of L-shaped. Just kind of hold it with your finger like this. There's a slot in the mid-frame assembly. Slot the ribbon cable in there, and it should kind of just line up and drop in. Make sure that this small display ribbon cable is free. This screw at the top, that's one 6mm screw. Screw that in. That one apparently didn't come out when I disassembled it. Then there are 3 more screws. These are small 2.5mm screws. 3 of the small screws that connect the mid-frame assembly. So mid-frame assembly is fastened. Now we're going to install the left Joy-Con board on the left-hand side of the Switch. So this is that board. If you are reassembling a Switch that got wet or has some liquid damage, be sure you are just checking for corrosion in different spots. We're just going to clean up those pads a little bit to make sure that they don't have any corrosion on them. Now I'm going to place this board down, and when you place it down, make sure that this display cable is up and out of the way. And then also make sure that your analog joystick ribbon cable goes through that opening right there. 2 4.5 and 2 6. The 6s go right where the gold outlines are. Just use that gold outline around there. Fasten that one down as well. Then the 4.5s, one right in here, and another one right in here. Okay, now we're going to reinstall the L and ZL. The membrane pad is in there. Just make sure that when you are reinstalling it, the membrane pad is in there. To reinstall this, I'm just going to slot this hinge right in there. I'm going to use the tweezers to push this up into there. Making sure that the spring is in there, then we are going to kind of hold that spring down and slot the L right in there. All right, now ZL. ZL is held by 2 of those gold 4.5s. Now for the analog ribbon cable, just take some tweezers and slot it in right up to just kind of that gold line there. And then I just take a spudger and seal it. Now let's do the displays ribbon cable and guide it. There's those 2 little tabs, one on each side. You can use your tweezers to kind of push it in a little bit. Again. Okay, so the volume buttons are here on a PCB with a ribbon cable attached to them. This is going to slot right into this area right here. Just slot it in there. And then route this cable right there. Let's take this ribbon cable coming from the mid-frame assembly and then slot it in like that. Flip this speaker. This plastic piece goes underneath. This plastic piece goes over. Like that. And there's a 4.5 yellow screw that connects that speaker down. Now we're going to reinstall the main board assembly. Make sure that the ribbon cables that we need to be up are up. When you're putting it back down, there's these connectors here. Make sure that those are out from underneath the board before you fasten it down. There's the black and gray connectors. There's the battery connector. Then there's this mid-frame ribbon cable. I'm just going to make sure it fits out. There we go. So this area right here, this is where the chip is, the main chip. This is the SD card reader. I believe that this is the Wi-Fi module potentially. I've lifted up this one to make sure there wasn't any liquid damage underneath there, and I could not see any. So that's a good sign. One more, we're going to get this ribbon cable and make sure it is out from underneath there as well. Okay, so I think we're looking pretty good here. Wiggle it around to make sure it sets. So in total, there's going to be quite a few screws that fit in here. There's going to be 3 of these 4.5s. and 3 of the small 3.1s that we have a lot of. First one goes into the speaker. There is one up here by the joystick's ribbon cable. And then there's one bottom on the opposite side of the speaker. It's important that you are not screwing these longer screws like the 4.5s into the area where the 3.1s go, because it will damage the plastic. Be wary of that. Oh, there's one next to where the blower sits, and then 2 down by the USB-C connector. Okay, now that we're down here by this USB Type-C connector, look here though on the side, there's this pink square. If it had not seen water, it would not be pink. So since it's pink, we can tell it's seen water. I saw it drop in the bathtub though, so I kind of figured that out. Let's attach this ribbon cable over here. It's the joystick ribbon cable, we're gonna slot that in, and then we're gonna use the spudger to press it down. The display ribbon here, just gonna set that thing in there. Okay, we slotted it in there, and then now let's push that piece of plastic down to fasten it. That is the digitizer cable. The digitizer we did not have to replace because it didn't seem like it was damaged to me. Other screen cable, before we install the card reader, we're going to push this one down. Now we are going to reinstall the game cartridge slot and the headphone connector, which is connected when you disassemble it. You can actually disconnect it. There's a ribbon cable right there that you can detach, and therefore you could replace these separately. So you could replace the game cartridge slot independently from the headphone jack, which is nice for repairability for sure. Lay that thing down in there, and we're gonna reconnect this ribbon cable into the slot right there. These are all the smaller 3.1 millimeter screws. The 4 on the headphone jack. All right, 4 there, and then there are, see, 1, 2, 3 here. Okay, now we're going to reinstall the blower. Right here, it sits with the label face down. Ribbon cable to the left-hand side. Ribbon cable right here, it actually kind of sits underneath the board and then pops up right there to slot into the connector. Take the tweezers, grab it like this, far at the back, and then guide it in there. Push down right there and wiggle it in. Use the spudger to take that flap and flip it down. Perfect. Fastening down the blower, we've got those blower screws, which are the ones that have the standoffs on them right there. Also Phillips screws. We got now we're going to reconnect the antenna cables. First, let's put down the white one, that kind of light gray color. All you got to do is just guide it on there, and then you can take a your finger or a spudger to press it down. I'm going to snap on antenna cable. Now that we've got everything fastened down, we're going to reinstall the triggers, starting with the R. Now that the R is in there, we're going to install ZR, and then fasten it down with 2 of the 4.5 run right here and 1 on the opposite side. All right, now we're going to need to reinstall the heat sinks. So before we reassemble the heat sink though, what we're going to have to do is remove that thermal paste right there. When you're removing the thermal paste, we're going to want to use some isopropyl alcohol, and then we're going to kind of scrub it off a plastic spudger. Don't use metal on that copper heatsink right there. Always try to use plastic pieces. Dry it out now because it's been left open. So it actually should come off pretty easily. Then take a cotton swab, some alcohol, and clean it off the rest of the way. Okay, now that that's all cleaned off, I'm going to move the switch to the side for just a moment while we remove the thermal paste from the other side here. Alright, then I'm going to use a Q-tip to clean it off the rest of the way here. We're going to reapply thermal paste, and the method that we're going to use is the spread method. So grabbing some saran wrap, a glove, anything really. We're just going to take the thermal paste and reapply it and then spread it around. Thermal paste is a kind of hotly debated topic. I applied a lot of thermal paste there, but there was a lot of thermal paste previously on there. So I just want to do it like it was from the factory. I'm going to spread it around. I'm going to take the heatsink, lay it back down, and push it in. So line it up with the screw holes in there. There's 3 3mm screws that go into the mid frame. The battery needs to be reconnected to the main board. The way that it's installed, these cables are kind of bent, so you might need to take the tweezers to kind of bend these cables like that, and then press it down. So the way that this is, it kind of loops around itself like that. All right, now we're going to reinstall the shield. To reinstall the shield, essentially all we have to do is just place this thing on there and then fasten it back down. See, this lines up right there. Slots in between the ribbon cable here on the side. There are 4 total screws in here. One of those is our last remaining 4.5mm yellow screw. That last remaining 4.5mm yellow screw fastens right here. And then we've got our 3 last remaining 3.1mm. Now we're going to reinstall the back panel. So line that up right there. Keep the triggers, but above the headphone jack, and then clamp it all back together. So everything is fully reassembled. We're going to hold down the power button. I don't know if the battery still has a charge. So let's plug it into power and see if we get anywhere like that. Let's go like this. Boop. Plug it in. So we've just replaced the display, but the Switch Lite still doesn't appear to be working. Or is it? What's going on now is that the display is showing a picture, but it's not visible to the camera. When I take the flashlight or this ring light and shine it onto the display at the right angle, I can see that there is in fact a picture on the display. But it's very faint because the backlight is not working. Why is the display not being backlit? Well, I suspect that the short circuit was not limited to the display ribbon cable. That short we witnessed may have happened on the left board and affected both the display ribbon cable and the circuit on the left board. To resolve this issue, I've ordered a new left board which includes a connector ribbon cable that we will be installing as well. In this case, I don't believe it is the connector cable, but for you it might be, so we're just going to replace it because it came with the kit. So let's take off this connector shield one more time. Okay, so shield's off again. And now with the shield off, we're gonna disconnect the ribbon cables on this side. Disconnect this one right here. Through the ZR housing. We're gonna flip this speaker back, kind of pull it up and out. I'm gonna take out the rest of the ribbon cables. And I suspect that it may have something to do with one of these. So we're going to take this off as well. And let's go ahead and take this ribbon cable off of this mid board as well. Okay, so we know that the display is working and the switch is working. So we know the problem lies with the LED backlights. somewhere on the path from the LEDs through this board here lies the issue. I am going to disconnect this speaker from the left board here. I think the easiest way to remove this thing is just to try to kind of get your fingernails up underneath the plastic and then pull it out. Alright, so here's the left board. So we're going to go ahead and remove this ribbon cable down here. But this ribbon cable down here at the bottom of the switch is attached with some adhesive. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of pull this just a little bit at a time like this. And we're going to reuse that adhesive. So this is some replacement parts. This is a replacement left board and replacement ribbon cable. Even though I don't think it's the ribbon cable, I did decide that we should replace that just in case. Here is the new left board. Looks fairly similar to the old one with a few exceptions. This one looks a little newer, but also the connectors are black right here instead of white. Otherwise, I mean, it does look very similar. So we're going to put this old one to the side, and then we're going to place in the new one. Now, we can reinstall this new ribbon cable between the main board and the left board. First, we install the ribbon cable flat with the help of some tweezers. Be gentle, latch it down. Grab the ribbon cable and fold it over itself. Then we'll press the cable flat against the battery and fasten it to the existing double-sided adhesive strip. We'll come back to this cable once the rest of the left board has been installed. This process we've done before, so we will speed right through it. Alright, put that back there. Now we are going to reconnect this backlight display ribbon cable. This is the display ribbon cable, this is the backlight ribbon cable. Alright, the long silver screws, one goes right here. And one goes down here where these kind of gold circles are. First, let's reconnect this ribbon cable. We're going to do a little bit of a loop. And using the tweezers, kind of slide it in there. We're holding it down, and then we're just going to close that snap. Alright, so I can already see the display shining through the backlight. And there we go. That is great news. So it looks like it was the left board after all. Here's the old left board that we replaced right here with this new board, and luckily the display is working now. So let's just complete this installation. This goes underneath the ribbon cable, a gold screw right here. Alright, so screws installed right there. We've got the left board installed, the speakers installed, the new ribbon cables installed. These ribbon cables are all fastened, the microphone's reconnected. Make sure you double check all this stuff. Now that that is all reinstalled and good, we can reinstall the back shielding. And we're all good. The first one that I install here is the gold one. And the gold one actually installs on this side, where right underneath there's that gold connection. That is right below the shielding. And then we have got 3 of the silver screws to be reinstalled. One down here at the bottom. One in the middle of the frame. And another one of them up here at the top left. Now we can really put the switch back together. We're going to reinstall the rear housing. Excellent. Now, all we've got after that is a few more screws. So what we've got left is some small screws and some large screws. The small screws go into the top and the bottom. So right here. 2 small screws more on the bottom. Four screws to seal up the back. The last 4 remaining screws, these are tri-point screws. And we can turn our switch around and power it up. And there we go. So Switch seems to be working pretty well now. Volume's working, buttons are working. Switch is working. Everything is good. So we were able to repair the water damaged switch, and all it took was a little bit of patience, some testing, and then some components. So what we ended up having to replace on this switch was the display. That is the old display right there. The left board, and then I'm not sure whether we had to replace this, but we ended up replacing it because it came with the kit, and now everything is working. The reason that I ended up replacing these components instead of diagnosing them properly by figuring and testing out the continuity of the circuits, and then soldering them back together with either a jumper wire or some solder on the PCB directly, was because that not everybody has the skills required to solder a jumper or solder a PCB, but seemingly everybody can go online and buy these components. And for a lot of people that are looking to do this repair, I think that's going to be the easier option. In total, these components costed only about $20, which is a lot less than the cost of replacing a switch, and even less than some of the warranties that they offer you, even though the warranties may still be worth it. So thank you again for watching this video. Hope you have a good one, and of course I'll see you guys in the next video.